Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Traffic and Transportation Decision Meeting. I'm Councillor Lindstad, Cabinet Member for Traffic and Transportation. Just some housekeeping information before we start. If the continuous fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the room and public gallery by the stairwells. Do not attempt to use the lifts. Please assemble at Queen Victoria's statue in front of the civic offices. In order to comply with the Portsmouth Cultural Trust fire marshal regulations, anyone who signed in at the Guildhall reception desk should remember to sign up when leaving the building after today's meeting. May I draw everyone's attention to the fact that this meeting will be live streamed, filmed from a camera at a fixed location at the back of the meeting room, and the recording will be on the Council's website. The camera will mainly capture the backs of anyone making deputations, but there will be some footage of them as they approach and leave the table where the microphones are located, and of people entering or leaving the room while the meeting is in progress. Members of the press and public are also permitted to record this meeting on the understanding that it neither disrupts the meeting nor records those stating explicitly that they do not wish to be recorded. Please can everyone remember to use the microphones provided when they're speaking, and it's the button on the right. Right, can we make some introductions? If I go this way, on my left.
I'm Councillor Simon Bosher. I'm the Conservative spokesman for Traffic and Transportation.
I'm Councillor Graham Heaney, the Labour Group spokesman for Traffic and Transportation, with a slightly croaky voice, I'm afraid, so apologies for that.
Wayne Layton, Finance Manager for Portsmouth City Council.
Michelle Love, Safer Travel Manager at Portsmouth City Council.
Nikki Musson, Parking Team.
Kevin McKee, Parking Manager.
Felicity Tibbury, Acting Assistant Director of Transport.
Joanne Miles-Smith, Democratic Services.
Thank you, everybody. Have we got any apologies? Nope. Okay. In that case, any declarations of interest to be made? Councillor Bosher?
None.
Councillor Heaney?
None.
Thank you. In that case, we go on to item number 1, which is TRO 2019, Proposed Residence Parking Zone, ME Hazelmere Road area. Kevin, are you going to introduce this?
Yes, Councillor.
Shall I ask the deputies to come to the table first? So I've got a list of people. Linda Moore, Mark Ivemy, Oliver Dempster, Miles Eden and Steve Cheetle. There is one late request, Tim Hornsey, which I'm happy to take. Thank you. Are there any councillors who wish to speak on this? No? Okay, thank you. Over to you, Kevin.
Thank you. This item presents the response to public consultation on the ME parking zone. The consultation started in December 2018 with an informal survey, and of those who responded, 57% thought a residence parking scheme would be helpful. It therefore then progressed to a formal consultation which took place between July and August. There were 500 responses, 376 of them from within ME. Of the responses within ME, 197 were in favour and 165 were against. Overall, though, from people outside and inside ME, there were 211 in support and 266 in objection. Most of those who objected outside were concerned about displacement, and under the rolling programme, the adjoining areas will be consulted in early 2020. Therefore, the recommendations in the report are that the ME Hazelmere Road area parking zone proposed in the TRO is implemented, that the proposed change of 10 metres of single yellow line in Hazelmere Road remains single yellow line, and that the proposed 26 metres of limited waiting bay in Hazelmere Road outside the carpet store is reduced to 14 metres, with a new proposal for a 12-metre loading bay to operate 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. Monday to Friday outside the carpet store, to be included in a subsequent TRO. And the fourth recommendation, that the proposed parking bays in Winter Road are deleted, but that the properties on both sides of Winter Road retain eligibility to apply for ME parking permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Deputies, you have 4 minutes each. It's 12 minutes normally, but there are 5 of you, give you some extra time, so 4 minutes each, and I will stop you when the 4 minutes is up. Would you like to go in sequential order, starting from your right to my left? And could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Mark Ivermy. I'm here for my wife. She runs the dance school down in Hazelmere Road, which there was no mention of in the original proposal. It said about the gym and the carpet shop, but nothing about the dance school itself. Now, obviously, because it's children that she teaches, they generally start straight after school, which is this, obviously 4:30 to 6:30. That's when the youngest, they go up in age order, that's when the youngest will be getting there. So obviously the parents have to park to be able to take them in. They can't, at 3-4 years old, can't be walking the streets on their own, obviously. If they have to park further away, you're then going to have more children crossing over busier roads to get there, which ultimately will probably make them potentially find another school where there's not parking issues, which they're obviously the foundation of the school, which if they don't progress through could well cause the end of the school. So that's our concern, really. How will it affect, and would, you know, she's not even said about getting a pass. She has teachers there that have to park, obviously, you know. Yeah, just wanted to make you aware that she's actually there for starters, because there was no mention of her originally.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, my name's Miles Eden. I've got a business in Windsor Road called Claims Recruitment Services. I employ 4 people, so including myself there's 5 individuals. It's quite a niche market that I'm in. We recruit insurance people within the claims industry. So a lot of the people that work for me live far afield, so have to drive to come in to work. For me, this would cost the business £1,600 on your proposal. It has been suggested that I finish at 4:30 when the scheme is introduced, but I can't do that because the insurance market doesn't close at 4:30. It carries on till 5:30. So we have to work when the insurance industry works, which is between the hours of 9 and 5:30. So I've got a bit of a croaky voice. I suppose my concern is that I don't necessarily agree that 4:30 is the right time. I've worked in the area for 7 years, had the business there for almost 7 years. 4:30 seems a very strange time. And to show you, if I can pass some sheets out to you, if that's okay. This is a view of the parking last Wednesday at 4:30. There's 5. Yeah. So this is actually Empshot Road, which my office entrance is within, which is where we normally park. So this is our vehicles parked in that road at 4:30 with, as you can see, a lot of spaces there at that time. £1,600 you might think is not a lot of money for a small business. It will affect the business. I would seriously consider me moving my business outside of Portsmouth. I do understand everyone's got reasons for wanting the scheme in and everyone wanting the scheme out, but for a small business like myself, the cost is very high, and as I say, it's going to be a huge implication to the staff and my business. I think that businesses are very important for Portsmouth. I think that the reason that the congestion has happened isn't necessarily a business's fault. So I don't see how we can be charge the amount that we're being charged, which is seriously £1,600 for 4 people who have cars. If the other individual had a car as well, which he doesn't because he's young, but if he does decide to pass his test and drive, then the cost of the business would be £2,100. That would therefore make me feel that I would want to move out of that area and move somewhere else where I could get free parking. I think it was Nikki that gave me the reasons why, and a lot of them nothing to do with my business, any small business that operates out of Winter Road area. Fratton Park football matches, there's never a match on when I'm working between 9 and 5:30. Event parking, I don't understand that. Church events, I mean, surely there's been churches there for the last 30, 40 years. There are a few new churches I don't know about that have suddenly sprung up. School parking, 4:30, the school's been picked up, everyone's gone, as you can see by my pictures that I took there last week at 4:30. You can actually see in one of them some little children down the road, so you can see that is just at school closing time, and you can see after the kids are picked up from the local schools that everyone's disappeared. Displacement for adjacent zones, very interesting actually, because I used to live in Orchard Road and there was no parking there at all. There was no restricted parking. I bought my property there because somebody told me, oh, there is going to be a new zone introduced, and sure enough it was. So I bought the house. So to start with, for about 2 months there was no zone. Then they introduced the zone. Then they took away the zone, and then they've now reintroduced the zone. Now to me, that really smacks of, one council majority approving it, another council majority not approving it, and who says that this isn't going to happen in this case either? And you're going to have got a lot of businesses going to move out or close, and then it could be a disaster for the area.
Can you draw to a close because your 4 minutes are actually up?
Okay. I just think a lot of these issues have nothing to do with small businesses. I have a small business, and therefore if I was to continue, it would cost the business a lot more money. I would have to consider moving from the area. My other slight concerns are the way you, as a council...
Can you please draw to a close?
Yeah. A note on a lamppost is all I saw. Okay. You presented this, and this was in August when all the students were away, so maybe they'll have a different opinion, and I do believe that this problem will just be moved elsewhere, which you will then target and then make those zonal areas as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, thank you. My name is Oliver Dempster. I own a house down in Southsea on Winter Road, which is currently let out as an HMO. I agree with the objective of this scheme, trying to reduce the car usage and parking in Southsea, as that is an issue. Generally to cater for car-owning residents, but I do not believe that the proposed scheme is fair or reasonable for achieving the desired goal. Take my house for instance. It's licensed for 5 residents. Currently there are 4 residents in full-time employment. Each one of those have a car used for their job. They also have bicycles which they use to commute to and from work when the weather or their job permits. With the introduction of this scheme, the first tenant will be charged £30, the second £100, and the third £590. The fourth and fifth tenant will either have to dispose of their car or move home, and that's not, they'll be moving home forcefully rather than out of choice. Neither of those results is fair or reasonable, and not something which the council should be promoting. It will cause resentment amongst the people sharing the house, and also an unnecessary cost and hardship for those forced to move or sell their car. Any suggestion that the HMOs are a cause of this problem is without merit, because the situation, or worse, can arise with a large family of 2 or more adult children, all with cars. There must be a fairer way to go ahead with this scheme, and perhaps maybe introduce it over a longer lead-in time, as so to give the population the chance of accommodating the change. If this does go ahead, there must be something done to help the people in HMO properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon, it's Steve Cheetle. I've run a business in Winter Road. We've actually got 4 businesses in Winter Road, and one of them I'm representing today is the florist in Winter Road. And I guess, I'm passionate about Portsmouth. I've run a business for 20 years in Portsmouth. We employ apprentices, young people, and that's tough enough. And I'm always standing up for Portsmouth. People say, why are you still in Portsmouth? Move to London, move to Guildford. And these are high-skilled jobs. And the challenge you'll have is that moving to North Harbour, for example, the technology park there, or perhaps over to the bottom of the motorway, you cannot get there effectively without driving or taking public transport. And really those people will make the decision to take their skills elsewhere. They will move out of Portsmouth to cities that have far better infrastructure. It's hard enough recruiting people. We work with companies all across the world, from Winter Road. And my opinion is that let the businesses do their job. They are providing employment. If you've got no employment opportunities, the soul goes from any community. Unfortunately, the retail environment is not what it used to be on the high street. So in effect, these the jobs that we're providing, we give hope to those people that we can train them, give them good skills. But for the life of me, I cannot understand why it's 4:30. Businesses close at 5:30, 6 o'clock, whatever. Set it later, 5:30 if it needs to be. Run it through the night. You've got the midweek football games that kick off later, and if you read all of the feedback from those objecting, they are all mentioning that, but yet that seems to not be spoken about in the proposal, 4:30 to 6:30. My suggestion, it's a lovely sign, Monday to Friday, no permits 5:30 to 7:30, that would solve you a midweek football scheme, and a little line underneath, Saturday, Sunday, no parking, 3:30 to 5:30. That covers all the bases. And is it an issue of enforcement? I don't know. Is that the challenge? You can't get people to, the funds are not there to check if people are parking on the permits. We could build you a great solution for that. Take a picture on your phone, send it, to a council control dashboard, tick it off. You've got your guy, right? There's a car park there. You're going to earn some money. We could build that for you in Winter Road. Very cheap. But it's a solution, and it would certainly cut your costs. But, otherwise, so that would solve those problems. Again, talking from the florist, you get a lot of guys, anniversary, whatever it is. Need to get some flowers for the wife on their way home from work. Perhaps they're trades guys who, leave their site at 4:30. They're driving home. They put up. They want to get their flowers, And if the parking is not readily available, they just simply won't shop there, and it'll be another shop that closes. And I think you can all agree Winter Road is quite a nice, attractive shopping zone, and it ticks all the boxes in terms of the desirable shops that are there. And I think it'd be sad to see it go, and certainly we will move, and that'd be a sad loss for you guys, not us.
Thank you. Next.
Good afternoon. My name's Tim Hornsey. I'm a resident of Winter Road. I'd just like to state that I do believe that this is just a tax. It's purely a tax. This will not help the parking. The parking problems that we have are not at 4:30. It's at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night when you have to try and park somewhere else. By introducing a scheme, this is not going to help us in any way, shape or form. I also think that the difference in prices is ridiculous, especially for the third car. Why you have to pay more than the first, I don't know. It seems, ridiculous, and that really just shows it for what it is, a tax. The other thing is, what's going to happen to the cars, that you're supposedly trying to stop coming to Portsmouth? No one's going to stop driving. They're just going to pay the tax. They're going to pay the tax, and they're just going to carry on, living their lives as normal. So I'd just like to put it out there that this is purely a tax, and no one can say anything different. Thank you.
Thank you. Before I come to the councillors, I'd like to ask the officers to answer some of the questions. Is that right with you, Councillor Bosher and Councillor Heaney? Okay. Kevin, have you made a note of any of the... Because I've made a note of some of them. Or is it you, Nikki?
Apparently.
Sorry, Nick.
Okay, just in response to the dance school, first of all, I think I did have some correspondence with your wife. The public notice where we describe the location of parking bays will often give a nearby business type to help people identify where the parking bays are. So where it said carpet shop and gym, it doesn't mean it's for them, it's just it helps people know where we're talking about. So we won't list all businesses nearby, it was just to help people identify where we meant.
My concern is obviously if you didn't know, you're going to have a lot of small young children walking further across the roads. Who's going to tell their parents the first one gets run over?
Can you just let the officers give their explanations, because you've all had your time, okay? Thank you.
The reason we proposed limited weight outside the premises is to give a turnover of vehicles and for visitors somewhere to park. It's in the middle of a residential area. When the planning application went in to convert the building to its current use, residents were extremely concerned about traffic congestion. And we reassured that wouldn't happen, but unfortunately it has. And we have in this report and outside of it concerns raised by residents about where people park when they're dropping off children and the volume of people that turn up by car, parking on WL lines, driveways, wherever they can. And one of the aims of parking zones is to encourage at least some people to think about how they travel to an area and consider alternatives. And it's human nature, we all jump in our cars for convenience and may not necessarily think of another way of getting somewhere unless we have to. And that's one of the aims of the parking zones, that even if 10 parents take other children with them or they can walk, it will make a difference to the traffic congestion that occurs in that small area. Winter Road, the businesses, obviously there's a lot of businesses on Winter Road. There's a lot of businesses within the 37 parking zones we have in operation at the moment. They are entitled to permits. And again, it can encourage people to think about how they get to work. There's a number of parking zones in place around the civic offices. I don't think any of us have to pay if we want to come to work by car. And I say a lot of the parking zones around Albert Road and Commercial Road, again, people have to think about how they get to work. The reason for the timings, 4:30 to 6:30 is when the demand is highest, but this new style of parking zone that restricts parking for 2 hours a day is more flexible for people coming and going to the area because you've got 22 hours of unrestricted parking. But it prevents long-term parking and it prevents vehicles from blocking spaces for days, weeks, months, because they have to move their cars at least once a day. And a number of the reasons that residents gave for wanting permit parking, I think someone mentioned a few of them. They're listed in the report because these are the factors that residents have identified as contributing to parking congestion. And it does mention local businesses. And I think every consultation we run, people say, can local employees, maybe some of them, think about how they get to work. And it's nice to have free parking, you know, when you're at work, but it's not always possible. You mentioned about customers' access to premises on Winter Road. We have a number of limited waiting bays in place already. They've been there since the 1970s, I think. So people can just stop in if they need to get flowers, for example. With regards to the permit costs, these are set out in paragraph 5.8.1 of the report, and explains why the charge was reintroduced for the first permit in November 2015. So that where there's a cost to the council providing a service that isn't covered by council tax, a charge is made to cover that cost. The permit charge is applied to all parking zones in the city, to ensure that the cost of introducing and operating parking schemes are funded from the income generated. And this includes the original set-up costs of signage and road markings, but they also have ongoing costs of permits and county charge notice administration, enforcement and maintenance. And it also describes in there why the cost of the second permit is higher. But I would also like to say that recently we had another report come to yourself, and the cost of the third permit is now, I'm not sure when from, but it'll be £300 for residents instead of £590. Okay, I don't know if no, just residents, yeah. So if Kevin wants to
Thank
add
you,
any-
Nikki. Kevin, have you got any bits to add?
No, I don't think so.
Right. Can I just ask? Somebody said there was needed a longer lead-up time. When was the idea first proposed here or published in the local news? Does anybody know that?
Yeah, the formal consultation was in July, August of this year. The informal one was in December 2018.
So it was first mooted in December last year. All right, so it's been around, there's been quite a long lead in time. And I've got a list of the things that went on. The notice displayed on affected roads, that's on the lampposts, as well as it being on the in the news. And there was a 21-day consultation, which was every household and business received, or should have received, a copy of that. And then when the TRO itself, the final consultation went out, that was another 21-day consultation that went to every property in the area, and letters were sent out. So there's been a long lead-up time with a lot of information that has been put both into houses, in the news, and onto lampposts with big yellow signs, which are quite easy to see. Somebody else mentioned enforcement, and I think you mentioned you were giving the information about the costings, weren't you? Because Wayne, who's our finance man, he can let you know where all the money goes from the charges, the permits, because quite a few people are saying it's a tax thing, it's an added tax. It is not an added tax at all. It costs money for the whole thing. Wayne, have you got a breakdown of that?
Yeah, so any of the money that is collected from residents' parking has to go to the parking reserve, and there's an act, the Traffic Regulation Act, that basically sets out what that can be spent on. And in short, it's maintaining off-street parking and any other kind of like transport-related safety things, sustainable transport, any tendered bus routes and those sorts of things. In terms of the question that you had where you said, why does it ramp up? Well, the pricing policy is set to reduce the number of cars which are in the city, hence why the more cars you earn, the more it costs you in order to reduce it down. But as Nikki said, there's the report that was taken, I think it was last month, and I've been trying to find it. The third permit cost has come down to £300. If you have a car which has got low emissions, and apologies, I don't know this off the top of my head, I think the permit is now free if you've...
15.
If you've got an electric car and those
in the same
sorts of
report,
things.
if you have an all-electric vehicle as your first permit, the permit will be free, and if your car emits less than 150 grams of CO2 per kilometre, sorry, 100 grams of CO2 per kilometre, the permit will be half price. That's if it's the first permit.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Councillors, Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stagg. I have a couple of questions of officers, if I can, from the start of the report, which I picked up on. The first is in 4.5 on page 7, and it's actually talking about the university. Now, we've had a lot of comments at previous meetings, whether it's been in full council, whether it's been in traffic and transportation, about the fact that the university are actively discouraging students from bringing cars into the city. And in fact, something was done around student blocks last month, possibly, or maybe the month before, I can't remember, very recently, but it was on the back of the text report. But there's a statement in the middle of 4.5 which I find somewhat bothering, and it says the aim of providing this information to the university is to make students aware of the proposed parking restriction and associated costs so that they can make an informed decision about whether they need to bring a car with them to Portsmouth. Now, it sort of smacks of the university not really being proactive about discouraging, but more a case of, well, here's the information, we leave it up to you. And I just wondered where we actually sit with the university and trying to get them to discourage students from bringing cars into the city, because we hear a lot of anecdotal evidence, usually at these meetings about zones, where people are saying it's always the students, we have empty streets when they're not here and full streets when they come back. Now, I appreciate that's anecdotal from what we're hearing, but it seems to me from 4.5 that the university aren't really doing much to discourage students from bringing cars into the city, and I just wonder where we're at with this.
I think perhaps we should include more information about the University of Portsmouth's travel plan and their policy. Is that maybe what you're getting at? Because that paragraph isn't about their policy. It was just that we asked the university to make their students aware of the programme of consultation and to share that information with them. Obviously they receive it through the door and it's on the lamppost and that, but we just wanted as a body the university to let their students know about it. It doesn't actually relate to their policy, which is separate, and I can give you the details of that outside the meeting.
Thanks, Vicky. I'm not saying it relates to their policy, and perhaps I'm reading this statement wrong, but the bottom of it is saying, as I said before, so that they can make an informed decision about whether they need to bring a car with them to Portsmouth, which says to me that we're feeding the university information about residence parking schemes, where they currently sit or where they plan to be in the future, and I understand that as a significant business in the city, and they are passing that information on to students so that the student can make the decision as to whether they bring the car into the city. That's how I read that. So it says to me that the university are not discouraging students from bringing cars into the city. They're passing the information about what the city council is doing with regards to parking and letting the student make that decision as to whether they bring the car into the city. So they're almost abrogating their responsibility, and certainly going back to the time when I was a cabinet member, and probably beyond that, the subject of students and vehicles in student housing cluttering up the streets, that's always been the perception, has been a theme that has never really changed, and I suspect that with all the other zones proposed coming into the city, certainly across the south of the city, that the same comments will be made about students going forward. And it seems to me that the university are not buying into this to actually support the City Council in what they're trying to do.
Yeah, I think in future reports maybe we should include details of their own policies and what they are doing to discourage students, because that, as you say, it's not mentioned here. They do, they have travel plans, they have their own policies, but this was purely to us, relating to us, letting them know about the residence parking programme.
And just to follow up on that, I think to be fair to the university, it's us giving them the information. I think part of the reason for giving them that is that they don't bring their car down and then look at the reasons for or how they can get a permit, so it's informing them before they come, so they don't bring a car unnecessarily. I think that's part of what we're trying to say there, and I think it probably could be better worded.
And that's in addition to the information they provide to students and their own policy.
Can I come back briefly on that? I mean,
I'm university man, so
what it is actually, yes. I mean, although I teach students, I don't deal with the accommodations of it. But my understanding is that the university has no power whatsoever to tell a student that they cannot bring a car. If it's registered, they can park it on the public highway. We can't ban them from bringing a car at all. So we can tell them about parking schemes. We can tell them, for example, we won't provide any parking at halls, for example, but we can't physically prevent them from bringing a vehicle into the university. And I'd be very happy to see if I can find out exactly what the preliminary information for new undergraduates is. I'm sure they would tell me if I asked them nicely with my TNT hat on, if that's helpful. But I just want to clarify that the university doesn't have the physical power to stop students bringing their cars.
Thank you. Have either of you got anything else? Right.
Well, could I ask a question about the timings of the zone? It appears the zone was advertised as 4:30 to 6:30, but I can't see much information about what the comments were on the timings. We've had some comments from deputations about the timings, but were there any comments on the timings, and what were those comments, and have we got any sort of quantification? Because I know on the back of it, right. So they were saying that obviously the individual ones, but
Yeah, you might be thinking of the MD zone. That obviously a lot of residents who, in theory, supported permit parking didn't agree with the times, as you say. The responses to this consultation, very few people have actually commented on the times, but some people don't understand why it's only 2 hours a day, not necessarily which 2 hours.
But you only advertise it as 4:30 to 6:30. You didn't offer any option about, would you like a different time?
No, we're unable to do that under traffic regulation order proposals. You have to put forward a proposal. It can't have options in it or a survey.
But the informal survey didn't have the options either.
No, the proposals are drawn up based on the responses to the informal survey, as you say, when people say that the problems are most severe. And then you go out with a formal consultation on relevant times, and then people tell you what they think. I think with the MD zone we had in July, there was such a variety of alternative suggestions. In this case, not many residents questioned the actual times. They just asked why it was only 2 hours a day.
Another question in relation to one of the issues that was raised by residents about the football parking. Now, football matches take place sometimes in the evenings, and there is one, I think, next week. But they also take place on Saturday afternoons. The evening ones won't be affected by the parking scheme because matches usually start at 7:45, so people could theoretically park in these areas after 6:30 and get to the match in time because it's not very far. So it won't actually impact on football parking at all. On Saturday afternoons, though, matches start usually at 3, finish at 4:45, 10:05, and two things could happen. Either people will take a chance and hang on to the end of the match and hope they don't get caught. Or people will take the decision to leave early, which people do, even now. So do you think that the scheme will actually have the impact of deterring football parking and providing spaces? Because I think possibly it might not.
I think it's something we can monitor. I notice in some of the responses from people in favour of suggesting 5 till 7, which would miss both the Saturday match and the evening matches. Part of the balance is whether you change the hours just to cover particular events. I think that on Saturdays there's 16 home football matches in a year, and do you change all the times just to cover those? But we think there will be a deterrent effect, and we can monitor that.
Okay. So if there is a deterrent effect and people don't park there because they get caught at 4:30, what do you think the displacement effect is likely to be of football parking moving to other areas?
That may well happen as well.
That it will happen, but you have no idea what this impact will be, except it will just impact on adjoining roads that don't have any schemes.
Yeah, it's very difficult to tell what the effect would be.
Okay.
Can I just add something there? I mean, I'm very keen on reintroducing the park and ride for the football, particularly now that we are up at Lakeside. We did it before, and I think we can do it again. Councillor Bosher, have you got any more questions?
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. Again, it comes back to the timing, because this is an advertised TRO, so it's 4:30 till 6:30, and effectively, whatever happens, those are going to be the times. So somebody who says, yes, I am in favour of the scheme, but I disagree with the times, are they counted as somebody who is in fact a supporter and therefore counts to the in favour, or are they counted as an objector?
Depends on the wording and how strongly they've worded it, but if they say I support permit parking but I absolutely don't want these times, that's counted as an objection.
Just to add to that, I mean, the appendix sets out the exact wording that the residents use, so it's open to anybody to look at it and judge.
Yes, thank you, Stack. Because, I've had a flick through some of the residents' views, and some of them are, here's one. I'm pleased to see that the residents' parking zone is being proposed for the street in which I live. However, I don't think the proposed permit time only period of 4:30 till 6:30 will alleviate the problems. And there's others that are going on saying, well, I agree with it, but I have no trouble parking between 4:30 and 6:30. It's later in the evening I have a problem. So those people are sort of being included as a yes, they're in favour, when in fact they're sort of totally disagreeing with the timings. And we've heard from the gentlemen that are sat here from a variety of positions that suggest that the timings that are being proposed are somewhat odd, and they don't seem to suit very many people at all. As Councillor Heaney's pointed out, it certainly doesn't help football-related traffic, and we've had situations where CEOs, or parking wardens for want of a better expression, don't tend to go out around the Fratton Park area when matches are actually being played, because there are safety issues attached with it. Now, is that still going to be the case? Because for those people that know that these sort of scenarios might happen, and you're talking, let's say, the 4:30 till 6:30 time for an evening match, they could arrive at 6:31 and be fine, and they've still got themselves just an hour to get to the park. Or alternatively, they could arrive earlier because they want a beer or something or other. Are we going to have wardens out confronting people wanting to park at sort of like 5:30, 5:45 in the evenings? And as Councillor Heaney said, people are going to be taking a chance, and if people are, you've got effectively a 15-minute window between 4:30 and when the matches generally finish on a Saturday, where we're either going to be flooding the area with wardens to catch people in that 15-minute window, or probably not going to be enforcing it at all, so it won't make any difference.
I think it's worth stating that there are a number of reasons that residents are interested in permit parking, and none of our parking zones are implemented for the sole purpose of dealing with events such as football matches. So this parking zone has not been designed to specifically deal with football matches. There's other factors that people have highlighted. The fact that it might deter some people could be a positive benefit, but as my colleague said, we wouldn't know how many at this stage.
And I think also the areas around the football stadium where we've had problems enforcing are the ones with two-hour limited wait, because you have to go and log the vehicle at the start of the period and then go back, and that 2 hours tends to conflict with people, match the times that people are arriving and leaving. With a permit only, it's a lot easier to enforce, because all you have to do is walk past the vehicle and see whether it's got a permit, and if it doesn't have a permit, then you can take enforcement action. It's a lot quicker than doing the two-stage process with a limited waiting, and with the limited waiting of 2 hours, it sort of spans the time that the football match is being played.
Any more questions? I'd like to make a few observations or points. One is that I sympathise and empathise with the problem people have. And I'm not talking just blandly. I lived in Greyshot Road for 20 years, so I know what the problem is. So I'm speaking from experience. However, if I just give you this statistic, in 2007, there were 107,000 cars registered to Portsmouth. At the end of last year, 2018, there were nearly 129,000 cars registered. So we've got an additional 22,000 cars, and this is without commercial vehicles and no extra parking spaces. Well, not significant amounts anyway. So we've got a problem. This is a problem that we're trying to solve, which we have created. The answer lies with residents and actually with businesses as well. And I'm not talking about the self-employed. I'm talking about the big commercial businesses, for example, who have, a lot of them have sold off their parking lots, and they're making their drivers bring their vehicles home. And those are very big, long wheel-based vehicles. And that is something that they've really got to address, and we as residents have got to address. There's only enough room outside most houses, unless you've got off-street parking, for one vehicle. I have no solution to that. We can't create additional parking spaces. Various people have suggested things like building up on Great Saltons, but if you live in Southsea, you don't want to walk from Great Saltons. And anyway, you'll be building on an old landfill site, which is full of cadmium, mercury, lead, and goodness knows what else. So you're not allowed to dig there. So we have no space in Portsmouth. So we're trying to solve a problem that has been created by the changeover to motor cars. And I have a saying, I keep saying it, I think some people in Portsmouth are physically welded to their cars. They can't possibly give them up, And I know it's difficult, and we have a catch-22 situation where our bus services are not good enough, and it's a catch-22 situation because people are not using buses as much now, because they use their cars, and therefore the buses are losing money because it costs as much to run a bus with 2 passengers as it does with 50, and you don't make a profit. In fact, a lot of the bus routes are losing money. And no, I'm not answering any questions. Everybody's had their say. So I'm trying to work hard with the bus companies, which are private companies, to improve our public transport system. But the fact that we've got all these extra cars on the road means the increased number of vehicles is leading to increased congestion on our roads. You try and get out of Portsmouth. It took me 45 minutes to get out up to Hills, and I live in Copland, so I'm not far away, before last, because it was just a nightmare. Increased congestion leads to increased air pollution. Increased air pollution leads to increased deaths. We have about 100 deaths a year just directly linked to NO2 poisoning. So this is an issue which is wider than just the lack of parking space, although that is obviously a major problem. I think we've got to look in the bigger picture and we've got to try and change the ways we all travel. And it's not easy, I know, because if in a family, one person works there and another person works somewhere else, it's not easy. But I honestly haven't got any physical answers. I can't build any. None of us can build any more parking spaces in the city. We're already overstretched, and our roads have reached breaking points. So it's one of those things we've got to actually face up to. I know it's hard for lots of people, but
Can I ask why we can't comment about your comment?
because the nature of the way the rules are set out for these meetings, you have time for a deputation, which you've had, and there've been chances for the officers to answer. I've picked up some of the points, and so have the officers, and the councillors have asked their questions, and they've got their answers, and they've pursued it. So we've covered as much as we possibly can within the time. And those are the rules, I'm sorry, that are set out by the council, not by me personally. So I'm going to move to...
we can make a comment on the recommendations, though, can't we? Because we
yes,
haven't had a chance to do that
yet.
Yes.
So do you want to do that now?
I heard what you said about the scheme and about the reasoning behind parking schemes. I mean, effectively, as far as I see it, as someone who's come into this rather new in May, is that the parking schemes create their own pressures for more parking schemes, because once you've started implementing them in one area, you create pressures on another area, which then requires another area to be implemented, and then another area to be implemented, and so on and so on and so on. And we are exploring, as we did at the last meeting, an area in the north of the city, in Copland, where there is absolutely no logic for having a parking scheme, but the residents are demanding it and thinking it'll solve their problems when it won't. And if the logic of what you were saying earlier is followed, we won't have a parking scheme in that area, but we'll wait and see what happens with that particular one. In relation to how these work, there's no question this is going to be approved today, because as the decision maker, you were the one who makes the decision, not us. We don't have any votes in this matter. But what I would ask is, as I did when I commented on the MD scheme, which affected my ward in July, was that you actually consider a recommendation to have a review of the operation of the scheme within 6 months. I'm assuming that if all goes well, you would be able to implement this in, say, January, because it usually takes a couple of months. So the scheme would run, say, till June, but you have a review before that 6 months is up to see how it's operating. And maybe if there are issues that need to be addressed and impacts on businesses, you would then come back and maybe consider whether there's anything that you can do to mitigate that. So that would be my suggestion, although I can't obviously make a recommendation. That's entirely up to you.
Thank you. I agree, and I think it was a sensible move with MD. The only problem, of course, is if you go out for a review, that takes up more time, and we're already incredibly short of officers. One of our officers who recently joined us is now leaving, so we're down again to one full-time, one part-time, and 2 possibly coming in part-time. Have I got that right?
We've got one officer leaving who is working 4 days a week, but we're hoping to get another officer in working 5 days a week.
Right, but we're still very, very short of officers, because these things take forever and a day to actually implement and to go through all the answers, because the officers go through every single answer and analyse them, and that's how they come up with the recommendations. Councillor Boucher, have you got any comments on the recommendations?
Yeah, I sort of agree with Councillor Heaney to something. I think we are where we are, and I think you're probably going to approve this anyway for the times that are part of the TRO, which is 4:30 to 6:30. Part of my concern centres around 5.4 in the report, which basically says the majority of objections received from residents living outside the proposed zone relate to the concerns of the impact of displaced parking on their roads. Now, I understand from somewhere else in the report that they're going to be considered for informal consultation in the last quarter of the year, which effectively is January, February, March next year, last quarter of the council year. Now, given the fact that this one started its informal consultation in December 2018, and here we are in October 2019, so effectively 10 months, there are people that are going to be suffering from displacement parking misery adjacent to this for almost a year after this is implemented, and I don't think that is an acceptable situation to be in.
Councillor Heaney suggested 6 months, which I would agree with. I know it's putting extra pressure on the parking people, but I think the long delay is because we didn't have enough officers. If you remember back a year ago, we didn't have enough officers to do it. We've advertised. We can't, because it's not just, you can't just sort of parachute in people to do it. You've got to have people who are fully qualified and experienced. And not everybody is a Nicky Musson who knows I keep saying this, I know, but she knows every road in the city, every yellow line, every double yellow line, every white line in the city. But not everybody is like her, but that's why it gets done as well as it does, because of people like her, and we don't have that many people, and it's difficult to recruit. I am going to agree to the recommendations, not just personal opinion, because if a majority were against it, I would say no, it doesn't go in. But a majority of people within the zone have said they're in favour of it. Therefore, on that basis, I will agree with the recommendation, and I will also suggest that we add that ASAP, at least within 6 months, we review to see if the timings are working out. Can I just say, MD, for all the angst that there was about it, I've had no, I shouldn't say this, I suppose, publicly, because I'll now get a whole load of people coming back, but I have, if I say, I've had 2 people come back to me who were absolutely violently against it, and they've come back and they said, I'm sorry, I was wrong. It's working beautifully. And these are, one of them is an ex-councillor. Oh, two of them actually are ex-councillors. So it is working in places. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect, because it's not, none of this, doesn't matter what we did, it wouldn't be perfect. But we're doing our very best, but certainly we'll come back to review. Thank you very much for your deputations. We move on to item number, what is it? Right, I don't know if I've got this here. What page is that on? Oh, it's in the next one, isn't it? Yeah. Right, oh yes, I got that. Right. Thank you, everybody. Speed reduction, is it, Michelle, are you going to present this?
I'm doing the rest of them.
Oh, you're doing all of them?
I'm doing all of them,
It's
yes.
now the Michelle Love
It is, yes.
show.
It's not
Okay.
the Ollie Wilcox show, it's the Michelle Love show.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Just so you know. Which one is on the agenda next? Speed reduction?
Speed reduction, you're right.
Okay, bear with me one moment. So speed reduction is a part of the local transport plan funding that was approved in March this year. When the funding was approved, it was approved as a generic pot with the proviso that we went through speed and casualty sites within the city, prioritised them according to the number of casualties and the impact that was needed, and came up with a plan of approval to spend. So the report that we bring today is the locations suggested for speed reductions measures as part of the speed reduction programme, and we recommend that you give approval to spend for those sites. So we carry out speed data surveys within the city, and the location of those is taken from the police casualty data that we receive monthly, resident requests, and obviously any incidents that we need to attend to. The three sites that we've asked for in this report are Southwark Hill Road, Old Manor Way and Clive Road. So obviously Southwark Hill Road is an arterial route within the city. It's on the main route to the hospital. Currently it is a 40-mile-an-hour road. And obviously you can see from the report that the average speed is 43 miles an hour, but can get up to 50 miles an hour in one direction, and 40 miles an hour in the other direction, getting up to 47 miles an hour. So we're asking for approval to implement a scheme that is likely to be mostly signing and lining, because obviously the gradient of the road means that if there were physical engineered measures, we would actually run the risk of increasing incidents because vehicles would run into those. However, with signings and markings, you can obviously make the road look visibly narrower without actually physically narrowing it. So it's likely to go along that line. However, obviously the designs will go out to consultation, and if there are any objections to the designs, we will bring it back to TNT for approval. That's the first site. The second site is Clive Road. So Clive Road is within the Fratton ward. It's within our 20-mile-an-hour residential zone. It's used a lot as a cut-through to miss Fratton Road, and obviously comes out on St Mary's Road. There's a nursery there. It backs on to, it's close to Kingstone Recreation Ground. It's a route to the cemetery. So we are aware that obviously there are a number of vulnerable groups that would use that route. The average speed limit is 30 miles an hour, so it's 10 miles over what we would expect. It also fits in with the A2047 Central Corridor as well, because it's just off there. So it's likely that we would construct a raised table at that junction to slow vehicles down. However, again, designs will be put together, and that will be taken out to consultation, and if there are any objections, that will be brought back. And finally, Old Manor Way. Old Manor Way had a historic speeding problem. We installed some vehicle activated signs. The speeding problem went down. Those vehicle-activated signs are now out of date. We can't get them connected to the network, so they are standalone. They've also now broken, so we're going to use some of the funding to obviously replace those with signs that can be dialed into to collect the data and to change any messages or do maintenance.
Thank you. Which one of you is going to go first this time?
Thank you, Councillor Stagg. I'm effectively going to talk on two of the three. I'm not overly familiar with the Clive Road one, so you've obviously done the work there. Dealing with the last one first, Old Manor Way, thank you, because it's something that I've been banging on about for a very, very long time. I'm pleased to see this is going to happen. Perhaps I'm being a bit premature in saying when, because I'm still getting people asking me about it. But I hope that this is not the end of the situation, because largely Old Manor Way, for those people that aren't familiar with it, connects effectively the Sainsbury's on the Euston Road and goes all the way through to Cosham High Street. So it is generally used by people, probably the same as Clive Road, that know the rat run, and therefore they will know when they're getting 20-mile-an-hour lights flashing at them that it actually means nothing, because they are familiar with the road. Now, we have actually got a major estate being built just off Station Road on what's called the old dairy site, and that's been identified in the local plan, and part of the section 106 was going to be looking at the junction infrastructure there, and I would hope that it is used for looking at that whole section, bearing in mind what isn't mentioned in this is the fact that you mentioned that the nursery with regards to Clive Road is that this whole stretch we're talking about runs along the south boundary of Springfield School, and teenagers with mobile phones thinking they're going to live forever, it's an accident black spot waiting to happen. And when we stick another 300 houses in there within walking distance of it that are going to have vehicles, I think the figure I saw was something like an extra 1,600 traffic movements per day potentially in that area. So although these signs are welcome and yes please can you tell me when, I'd like to think that this isn't something that is just going to tick a box and it's going to go away, and that we are going to be looking at this and involving potentially the ward councillors, not only from Drayton Farmers but also from Cosham, because it connects Cosham, in something that can seriously look at this whole stretch all the way through. We get problems on the Havant Road, and we've had some Havant Road resurfacing work being done overnight recently, which has caused me a headache. But Old Manor Way has become the major rat run to avoid that, and of course my email inbox has gone up with regards to traffic. So please don't let that stop at that point is my plea to you. Make sure that we do something serious, because there is the school associated with that. And you've also got Court Lane just around the corner as well, which is obviously there. So two significant schools and what is a long straight road, or largely a long straight road. The other one, Southwark Hill Road, I hear what you're looking to do with that, but I don't think you're going far enough with this at all. If I can draw you to the map which you've got on page 155, the map isn't quite wide enough, but you take Southwark Hill Road past the hospital all the way up to the roundabout at the top. You then come back along the top of the hill and you've got the George Pub, and you come back down the London Road. You've effectively got a triangle there that is used by a lot of the people that use, I call it mixed burger van, but you know where I mean, the beauty spot on the top of the hill. And it's become a triangular racetrack. That's what it is. How fast can you get round the triangle and back to the beauty spot? And that's what happens. You've also got the section on Portsdown Hill Road between the junction at the top with the George going east to the top of Farlington Avenue, which is a residential area, which is sort of in the same area. We are inundated as ward councillors, and it's not just the Drayton Farlington ones, the Cosham ones get it too, and the Paulsgrove ones get it as well, because it is a TT racetrack whenever the weather is fine, which the police, by their own admission, don't enforce because they are motorbikes, and they fly along the top of the hill and go up and round that triangle, testing each other's bikes out. And they actually go down, it's not within our neck of the woods, down the back of Ashley, down the Wickham Road. And you go down, if you drive down there on a leisurely day, the number of floral tributes down that road are unbelievable with bikers. What I would say is, I applaud what you are trying to do, but I think the corridor that you're looking at is too narrow. You need to look at that triangle and the bit just to the east of the George where you've got residential properties. Again, bearing in mind that a lot of those houses north of the George, I should say, the other side, are actually in Drayton and Farlington. They're PO7, but they actually, a lot of them, they tend to come over the top of the hill, cross those roads there to come down to Springfield to go to school, because that's part of the catchment area. So again, you've got a lot of school-age kids using that, but that whole triangle is used as a racetrack all the way around, and I don't think looking at, and I understand why you're looking at signage, lining, because you don't want to add to accidents on the steep roads in this aspect, but I think you are not looking at that in enough detail, and you need to look at that triangle and that little bit in a whole to mitigate the problems that you've actually got there. I'd also sort of say, where exactly are you going to consult on that road? I don't know whether an awful lot of the horses actually have a vote, do they, in the fields there?
So to go back to answer the Old Manor Way,
yeah.
The signs will be in before the end of the financial year. So it is a question of ordering them.
Yeah.
The poles that they sit on are heavier and wider, which means we need to do the usual utility surveys, etc. And then you have to have a core ground temperature of 5 degrees or above to put it into the concrete sets. So depending on it's very weather dependent now at this time of year, because there's no point in me sending people out to stick poles in the ground if they're going to fall over. So if we get a mild winter pre-Christmas, then that will definitely help, because that will speed things up. But if not, it may be that we have to wait until after Christmas in order to get the signs out there, because they need that warmth in the ground to set. So that's Old Manor Way, but it will be done before the end of the financial year.
That's fine, Michelle. I mean, I have been asked questions, and I was given a very good answer. For life of me, I can't remember who it was. It basically said it was all completely out of date. So my assumption would be you'd have to rip out and replace everything. And I am getting asked a question, but I don't really want to go back and say, Michelle said by the weekend, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't do that to you. I'll say Felicity said by the weekend instead. But a crude time scale that I could reasonably work with, and if by the end of the financial year, which is effectively end of the first quarter of next year, that will probably be fine in that respect, but at least people would know that something is actually happening on that basis. Thank you.
So in respect to Old Manor Way, and we are aware that obviously the old SSE site and the old dairy are being developed. There will be SSE's done, and that's obviously increased traffic movements, and then there'll be another increase with the old dairy site. There will be SIL funding allocated within the ward, which is obviously the next step on from Section 106 money. So we will be looking at what needs to be done with the increased traffic movements in order not to increase any kind of congestion within the area, but to make it as safe as possible. And then we can put in a funding bid that may span over LTP, because there's already a mandate written for the problems that we're experiencing on Lower Farlington Road, to include both Old Manor Way and Lower Farlington Road, that would be funded through an LTP bid and the Community Infrastructure Levy from the new development on the old dairy site. With respect to the triangle, you're absolutely right. We're working, a lot of it is behavioural change as opposed to what engineered measures, because as I've said, putting in engineered measures such as chicanes and things like that actually says to these people, do you know what, that's even more of a challenge. I'm going to see how quick I can get round that. So a lot of it is behavioural change. There is a new police officer that we're working with, the previous one retired, and we are sitting down with them to go through what campaigns we can run as joint campaigns. That's not to say that we won't look at putting actual physical infrastructure on the road, but we want something that's going to be as effective as possible. And obviously motorcyclists are something like 2% of the travelling population, but account for an enormous amount of casualties. So there will be a move towards enforcement, because we simply cannot, the rates of injuries and fatalities there are within the motorcycling community cannot obviously be allowed to continue. So for the triangle itself, we will monitor speed data and accident data over the next year, because the budget that we have for speed reductions, it would not be possible to do that entire triangle. So instead, we will collect data, we will work with the police on behavioural change, and if it is felt that physical changes can be made that will be of benefit to everybody, then we will put in a bid for the following year.
Councillor Heaney.
I'm glad I let Councillor Bush go first, because he's got much more intimate knowledge of those two than I would have. So I
used to be a Cosm councillor.
I used to be a Cosm councillor, but of course that was 15 years ago. I mean, you know, it's a long time ago. So things are. So it
You
means
didn't know your wards when you were a Cosm councillor.
well, I knew there were issues, but it's 15 years since I've been a councillor. Right. I suppose the one that I just want to make a couple of comments on is Clive Road. If I understand it correctly, the idea is to have a raised junction on Guildford Road, Clive Road. That would be the plan. Yeah. I mean, I recognise what you're saying about the speeding and it being an issue, so we have to try and do something. One of the concerns I have is the residents' parking zones. Although they have a 20-mile-per-hour limit, they are just advisory, and essentially they aren't enforced. We've tried to get the community speed watch things going, but they haven't really been effective in getting people to obey the rules. So people just treat them as, well, 20 miles per hour, but nobody actually really worries about going over it. So until we have some proper enforcement, and maybe it doesn't have to be regular, but it has to be random and publicised, people will still continue to go over 20 miles in these 20 mile speed limits, because if they know there's no enforcement, some people will be nice and do what they should do, but other people won't, and I've seen plenty of examples of that where I live. So we've got to think about maybe doing more enforcement to make sure that people are aware that if they do go over 20 miles per hour, they can and possibly will be caught.
Unfortunately, the police won't enforce the 20-mile-an-hour limit. It's against ACPO guidelines. That's what we've been told. But I tell you one thing we could try and get along with. They used to do E&E days, education and enforcement days, and the trouble is it's only the road traffic police who can do it. I think we've only got 6 in South East Hants on 3 shifts, so it's only 2 on at any one time. But we could try and see if we can get some E&E days in areas which are identified as trouble spots. Okay.
Yeah, we can certainly ask the police that. We do have 2 community speed watch groups within the city, one based in the north and one based in the south. Obviously they're volunteer led, so it is very dependent on when people have the time, and obviously where they live is their priority, because the reason that they've joined is because they are concerned about the speeding directly around their area. However, we have given them the equipment, so we will make contact with them and ask them if they would like to do some voluntary speed watch work within the area.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy to agree the recommendations, and I think there are some things to take it further forward at a later date. Thank you. Now, your next item, Michelle, I think is school crossing patrol infrastructure. Thank you very much. Pardon? Councillor Hooper.
Would I have to ask my questions, because I'm quite aware I may sit and listen and my questions may be answered. So, I mean, did you want me to pose them at the beginning?
No, if you just sit and listen to what Michelle says, and then if you have any questions, then by all means. Okay?
Really sorry I missed a bit before, because I've got an awful lot to say about Suffolk Hill Road, because I live there. And unfortunately I missed
Well, you see.
I've been working with the hospital to try and deal with with the acute backlog of traffic.
Right. Could you do that
Yes,
outside
of
this?
course.
Thank you. Michelle. Are we
Okay,
ready, Michelle?
Yes, thank you. So, school crossing patrol infrastructure. As you'll be aware, we run a school crossing patrol service. It's not statutory for every council to run a school crossing patrol service, however we do. Currently we have 54 school crossing patrol sites. We maintain the school crossing patrol service obviously because we are very aware of the amount of traffic that there is in the city. There are a lot of pupils that travel to schools that may not be within or they perceive not to be within walking distance of their houses. So we place school crossing patrollers on key sites at or near schools. The reason for that is multiple. Obviously road safety, so that there is a safe manned crossing point within school hours, or the hour before and the hour after school. It's also to encourage walking to school, so there's obviously evidence to show that if you walk to school it's less stressful, your child has an opportunity to talk, you have an opportunity to talk to your child. It works in with the work that we're doing with public health. Obesity in Portsmouth is higher than the national average, and childhood obesity particularly is higher than the national average. So by providing safe crossing points where people have the confidence to be able to cross over the road in order to walk to school, hopefully we'll have a knock-on effect with children wanting to walk to school, particularly if you work that in with our successful Stomper campaign and the behavioural change work that we do with schools. So the reason that we would ask for this report to be approved and recommended to spend is that we've carried out an audit of our school crossing patrol sites. We've audited the key ones and prioritised them, and those that don't have enough infrastructure, and when I say infrastructure I mean the triangular warning signs, children crossing, the amber wigwag lights, those most popular sites, we are wanting to install wigwags and triangular warning signs that are also lit for the darker winter afternoons. So within the report is the list of sites. So all of these sites have had counts carried out at them, and they are some of the most well used within the city. So it's Alloway Avenue outside Beaconbury Primary, London Road on the junction of Stubbington Avenue, St Mary's Road, Milton Road, Shearer Road, so obviously that leads to Langston and Newbridge, and Tredegar Road, which is Cumberland Infant. And then we would also keep a stock of signs within the Civic, because at the moment we have obviously 54 school crossing patrollers and 4 relief school crossing patrollers. They are primarily of an older age group, because obviously it is traditionally a role that's carried out by those people who may have retired and things like that. In the winter we face health problems, so if we know that there is going to be a school crossing patroller that is off sick, then we can have a stock of signs where we can go out and install them temporarily while we organise for a relief school crossing patroller to be at the site. It's not an ideal solution, but at least it gives drivers fair warning, particularly if children are trying to cross the road and there's absolutely nothing there. So that's basically it.
Thank you. Councillor Hooper, have you got any questions?
So these are obviously Portsmouth centric because I am one of the councillors up there. I'd just like you to clarify for me, because obviously we've got the new school entrance, haven't we, on Marsden Road. I've been told the Beacon View crossing is moving along towards the shops. Is that right?
And no, we haven't made any decision to move it. I mean,
right,
I know
there was an email in circulation that I read. Apparently it was moving up. You know, you've got the pedestrian crossing, and that was going to be manned, because I think they're hoping, obviously, that children will be using the new entrance to Beacon View, which is down Marsden Road. So it was logical to me that the crossing would be moved up the road. Is that not the case?
I haven't written that email. I can certainly check with my officers.
Okay. I will find it.
Yeah, thank you. I can tell you that we don't man zebra crossings, and the reason that we don't man zebra crossings is it becomes confusing, because obviously legally a driver already has to stop at a zebra crossing, and once the people that have crossed the crossing have moved off, that driver can then move forward. If you then have double that up with somebody who has the power to stop traffic, which is basically a school crossing patroller, we found from previous experience that this becomes confusing. Drivers can start and stop, and we run the risk of them overrunning the zebra crossing. The new entrance is at the bottom of Marsden Road, adjacent to Racecourse Lane. So we will obviously carry out counts of where those children are coming from, because even though the entrance is in a different place, the children are coming from the same catchment area and are likely to use the same route to school. So they would still need probably to cross over Alloway Avenue at that point, because that's their desire line. So yes, we will work with the school to say move up to the zebra crossing or to another point where we would place a school crossing patroller, but I don't think we would move them straight away, because people are creatures of habit, particularly on a school run, and they will still cross because it's a traffic island at the moment, and they do a half and half crossing. So I personally, as you know, safer travel manager, I wouldn't want them to move until we'd carried out a full assessment.
Can I say that the questions about individual sites is really something outside this meeting. What we're looking at today is to approve the infrastructure budget. So that's what I'd like to sort of stay with, okay? Is that right with you, Councillor Hooper?
Yeah, that's fine.
Good.
I just thought I would be obviously allowed to come and ask a question about my specific crossing.
Well, yes, I think that do that. I think outside of this meeting, go and see Michelle and sort it out. I don't
I'm
want
in
to
the
cut
office
you
tomorrow. If you want.
I don't want to cut you off, but
and the St Paul's issue as well, please.
Yeah, fine, good. Thank you. Councillor Bosher. I've got Councillor Heaney next because I'm being fair.
No, I'm fully in support of this. I don't think there's any particular things I have any issues with, so I'm happy to support.
Councillor Bosher?
I'm like-minded with Councillor Heaney. I mean, at the end of the day, it's about putting the strategy in place and the budget to go with it. I'd like to think that obviously where we have specific sites that have been identified, that once you've agreed this, and I have no objections to it, that obviously you'll engage with the appropriate ward councillors, and so that they actually, so like Councillor Hooper and others, so that they actually have an input into what you are planning to do.
There won't be designs as such because it's a pole and a sign, but what we will do is once we've got the programme of when the signs are going in, we will share that with ward councillors prior to them going in, and if you have any queries at all about the location of the signs or the justification for it, by all means do put those queries forward. Obviously this is dealing with 6 sites. We will then look to gain funding from the LTP bid next year because there are 54 sites. Some of them are completely compliant and some of them have nothing at all. So we're dealing with the worst at the moment, and then obviously we would look to upgrade and improve the sort of sites that do have some infrastructure within the next year.
Can I just ask a question? These are obviously manned sites at the moment. Are some of them manned, some of them not? Do you see this as an assistance to the manned sites, or is this ultimately going to be a replacement for lollipop people going forward?
Currently, the only way we replace lollipop people is if we put a full engineered crossing, so it would have to be pedestrian, toucan or zebra. This is simply to make sure that those manned sites are compliant and that drivers are made aware and that the area is lit, particularly on the darker winter afternoons when children are coming home from school.
Thank you, Michelle. Very happy to agree to the recommendation. Now, item number 6, which is yours again, I think. That's public right of way. Pardon?
Which one are we on?
We're on public rights of way now.
Okay, so we've got this report. We would like the recommendation that we go out to external consultation on the draft rights of way improvement plan that officers within the Safer Travel team have put together. We have a statutory duty as a highway authority to produce a 10-year rights of way improvement plan. So the purpose of the plan is to review the existing measures that were put in the previous plan, which ran from 2007 to 2017, to make an assessment of the existing public rights of way network. So at the moment we have, I believe, 104 rights of way within the city that are located on our definitive map. And obviously we would go out to consultation with key stakeholders and the public. So there is a copy of the draft plan that's gone out with the papers, so I'm happy to answer questions on anything that you have about the draft plan. We would basically advertise it for 12 weeks and in that time take in all of the responses, and then after the 12 weeks we would obviously respond to those. Again, if there are any objections within the statutory consultation, then we will bring those objections to Traffic and Transport Committee for further assessment and response. Really, that's the crux of it at the moment. We're carrying out our statutory duty. We would like to put this out to public consultation, and then we will come back. If we put it out to public consultation, it's likely to be by the end of November, which would give us December, January, February to consult as the 12 weeks, and then we would bring it to probably March TNT if there were any objections. If there weren't, it would still come because we would ask for approval to adopt it.
Councillor Bosher. Can you turn your... Yeah.
All you're effectively doing is agreeing to go out to consultation on something that we have to statutorily do every 10 years, so I don't see any point in making any comment.
Councillor Heaney.
Just one thing, I did make a comment. I didn't find the map very helpful. Just the map in here is particularly unhelpful in terms of identifying routes. So I hope we get something better so that people can actually identify, because you can often work out, you know where a route is, you want to see where it is on the map. So a better map would help. But otherwise it's fine.
Is that the map of the definitive routes?
Yes.
Yeah, so that is available broken down in parts on the website. So obviously that was just a representation, and we know it is quite small. So if you want to check on any specific rights of way, you just have to search for definitive maps on our website, okay, and it brings it all up in, I believe, either ward sections or geographical sections, and it shows you where they all are. Alternatively, we hold an enormous paper copy in the office, so if you want to come in and have a look, by all means do.
Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions, and one is, are there particular stakeholders you go to, or is it just general? I'm just thinking of people like Ramblers, Friends of the Earth, disability groups, etc.
All of the above that you've just mentioned. So we have a list of statutory stakeholders, which would include all stakeholders of groups for active travel, walking, cycling, Friends of the Earth, the Ramblers Association. There is an association to do with bridleways and horse owners. I can't remember the name of it. Yeah. So yes, all of those we will obviously send either a written word or email word to say that this has now gone out for consultation, and again it will be advertised in the newspapers, and so they will have 12 weeks to obviously formulate any response they want to put forward.
I have read the whole report, but I wanted it because it's being filmed. It can go out nationally, well, not nationally, but locally. And my other question is, and I think I mentioned this to you earlier, and that is a lot of these paths are not disabled persons accessible. Now I realise this could cost a lot of money, but I think some of them, the bigger ones, I think should be made accessible to disabled people, and wheelchairs in particular.
Yeah, so the scrutiny panel, the tech scrutiny panel, has actually approved that we do a highway accessibility piece of work to basically assess the highway network as a whole to find out how accessible it is, and that will include things like, it's basically the bigger picture, how do you get from A to B, but going down to the detail about can you use this path, can you use this right of way, are there barriers, etc. Obviously, we have a PFI contract with COLAS, and part of that contract says that assets have to be up to current standard, so we can carry out an audit has been done of the rights of way already, so we can review that audit, and then if there are any particular rights of way, for instance, that are have barriers, physical barriers, then we can look at getting those removed. The width of them, which obviously, because you need like 1.8 metres to have a pedestrian and a wheelchair walking side by side, if it's privately owned land either side, it's unlikely that we would be able to have much influence. However, we can make it as easy as possible, and obviously good communication, signage, things like that to say, the width of the routes, that can be looked into as well.
Just a comment, and that is this goes well with trying to get the modal shift. I mean, if you're getting more people out of cars and walking around, and also there's the new app, which I can't remember the name of.
Routes for You.
That's the one, yes. Which would be very useful with this as well. Is that live at the moment?
Routes for You is live, so you can download it from your Android or iPhone store, and it is a reporting app to show if there are any either permanent, temporary or short-term obstructions on your route. It will also, so then obviously it collates all of that data. You can then put in which route you want to take on a map, and it will highlight if there are any obstructions. So yeah, that is live at the moment. Please do download it on your phone, and everybody can use it.
Lovely, thank you very much. Yes, I completely agree with all the recommendations. Well, there's one, isn't there? So yeah, totally agree with it. And what is the last one? What page is that on? I think I've lost. Pardon? Yes, okay. And is this you again, or is Andy?
Yeah, it's me again.
Okay.
Andy's here to support if necessary.
Right, okay, thank you. Right. Go ahead, please, Michelle.
So this is to bring forward the report to approve the implementation of the first stretch of the Fratton to Hard Interchange Active Travel Corridor, or some know it as the East-West Corridor. And obviously the purpose of this is to encourage active travel between the east and west of the island. We have several key routes north to south that have been improved and are continuing to be improved, but the east-west routes are obviously the routes that are used primarily by cyclists who are live and work within the city. So this is to ask for approval to implement a segregated cycle lane between the junction of Hazelmere Road and Goldsmith Avenue and the eastern approach to Fratton roundabout, which will improve connectivity, to redesign the Goldsmith Avenue Francis Avenue junction to improve the associated pedestrian and cycle infrastructure improvements such as shared space, and obviously to improve safety, and junction improvements at Hazelmere, Francis, Talbot and Fernhurst, and a new traffic island pedestrian crossing point for pedestrians by the Lidl supermarket on Goldsmith Avenue. So the reason for this work is multiple. So it's to do with obviously the air quality in the city, and to do with continuing to encourage modal shift into more active travel modes to give people safe routes to be able to cycle and walk, and also the fact that this is a very high casualty area. So we've had 24 collisions involving cyclists and 4 involving pedestrians between the boundaries of the scheme, and that's in the 5-year period between 2013 and 2018. That is one of the highest casualty areas within the city. So the proposed scheme will aim to improve safety, obviously with the aim of reducing collisions, but also look to improve the physical infrastructure to encourage active travel as well. Okay, so we had We sent out 82 consultees because, again, the actual route itself is not a massively residential route. It's an A-class road, so most of the consultees were businesses and stakeholders along that road, but also we sent out to the list of statutory stakeholders. We got a 10% response rate, and although... so a lot of the responses that came back had questions, particularly because they felt that there may be some barrier to access to properties and things like that. Within the response document that you've got that lays out what we said to people, there's going to be no actual physical barriers to access. There will be physical barriers to vehicles parking on the pavement, because obviously that's quite a big issue along Goldsmith Avenue, where vehicles pull up and then they obstruct the cycle lane and they obstruct the footway, which is quite narrow. So there is the intention to try and deter that as much as possible with bollards and defenders, but no actual physical barriers will be placed across any access. So the aim of the scheme, and the reason that we've asked for approval, is because it will improve lane discipline, improve the perception of safety, like I said, reduce the amount of casualties, allow for a greater number of pedestrians and cyclists to use this corridor, and to obviously work in with the air quality agenda and the drive by public health towards a general healthier population.
Thank you, Michelle. Councillor Bosher.
Thank you very much, Councillor Stagg. I mean, I haven't necessarily got much in the way of questions, because I think something more specific will probably come out in the view of visuals as we go forward anyway with regards to this. But it's more to do with the fact that this Goldsmith Avenue stretch in particular has been ongoing for years. I mean, it was certainly when I became a cabinet member, on the back of the tragic death that we had in the Eastern Road, which we looked at. It came, I had my inbox again filled up with Goldsmith Avenue and the roundabout at Fratton Bridge being a major issue for cyclists in particular. And I've cycled down that road, and you literally, certainly from the Holbrook Road bit down to the bridge, and you literally take a deep breath before you actually cycle down there, because you're navigating around vehicles that blatantly disregard the fact that you've got a cycle lane on the south side there and just park where they like, and you're being forced out into traffic. So in my mind, this is long overdue, sorting something out like that. Be interested to see what you're doing on the making that T-junction there, because that's the one, if I'm correct, where it sort of goes down and there's a little stub bit that goes round it, isn't it? So on the end, is it Talbot Road there somewhere in that neck of the woods? And that always strikes me as being, I'll say an accident waiting to happen, but I think the accidents have probably already happened there more often than not. But as far as I'm concerned, I am supportive of this. My only disappointment is that it's taken 2 or 3 years at the very least to actually get to somewhere where we can actually protect cyclists on that east-west corridor.
Thank you. Councillor Heaney.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of comments, really. I mean, I noticed that the recommendation says a segregated cycle lane where feasible, and the police have raised an issue about whether cycle lanes are big enough for a cyclist of more than one to be there, because it would be ideally if a cycle lane was wide enough so that different speeds of cyclists could actually move through, but that road is going to be very narrow. And if you put a physical barrier, a hump or whatever, in the road, then, as they quite rightly point out, a slow cyclist going along and a speedy cyclist coming up behind could end up with one of them, having an accident. I mean, obviously it requires people to be sensible, but, it does make it difficult. Obviously a physical barrier is better because it prevents cars from running into the cycle lane, because they feel something if they do stray to the left, they end up hitting the bump. But the issue will be, how feasible is it to do that along any of that stretch? I mean, I think there's a big question mark about that at the moment. I think the cycle forum would like something that is more of a physical separation rather than the lines, although lines do help. But I don't know whether we're going to be able to do that there. So I think it's nice to say, where feasible, but how feasible is it going to be and how much are we going to do? Because if you have a tiny little bit of road with the hump on it, it's not going to be much use really, is it, to have a tiny bit? So you've got to be reasonably substantial. I'm assuming that when you have a new crossing, if you have a crossing at Little's, that the physical barrier would stop while the crossing takes place and then continue after that. Is that how it would work? Question?
Yeah, so the crossing at Liddle is drop curbs and a traffic island, so it's not a lit crossing, because there is obviously a pedestrian crossing just further up just past the Shell garage. Yeah. So this is to accommodate the desire line of people crossing who want to cross directly at Liddle and have been doing so without obviously going up to the crossing. So that, and obviously yes, it would be completely unobstructed. So yes, where feasible is obviously, as you've said, it's an A-class road, Goldsmith Avenue, and so while we would love to not have any traffic, it's not, it's not possible at the moment. We have to leave it as an A-class road because it's a key route for vehicles to get out of the city, particularly obviously if there is an incident on the M275 or something like that, we immediately divert along the east-west corridor and back out on the Eastern Road. So where it says where feasible, it is related to road widths. I don't know if you've been along Stamfordshire Road and Twyford Avenue recently, but the lining there has changed and we've taken out the cycle lanes that were not up to standard, and where it's not feasible to have them, have included green squares within the centre of the carriageway instead, to encourage cyclists to take up that position in the middle of the carriageway as opposed to riding along the edge, because obviously incidents occur where cyclists are swiped by vehicles turning left or right depending on obviously which direction they're cycling in. And this would have to take place we would actually be removing some substandard that are not the width. And then obviously you can have advisory and guidance lanes as well. So we have the designs, we can certainly forward them to you and then you can have a look through them and by all means we can answer any questions.
That's very helpful, thank you. And will the cycle forum also have an opportunity to see these before they...
I believe the cycle forum have already seen them. First draft, yeah. So yes, we've met once with the cycle forum and we have another meeting with them on Tuesday at 2 o'clock to go through future plans, and we can certainly show them the second draft at that time. That's all right.
Ian, have you got any comments to make?
Not really.
Okay, I'll leave it to you for Tuesday then. Anything else? But I think I agree with Councillor Bosher. It's longer than three years, Councillor Bosher. I mean, this was on the cards when I was cabinet member before. So I'm so pleased it's going to happen. But there are problems.
Can we have a say in this?
No, you can talk to Michelle afterwards if you so wish. Yes, is that all right, Michelle?
Yeah.
Yeah, fine. There's a very narrow bit as you coming to the crossing for the station. The road is narrow, the cycle lanes, the pavement's narrow, so that's where the lack of feasibility is probably going to come in. But I think it's long overdue, and the sooner it's made safe, because it terrifies me if I'm driving along there, if somebody has to, if the cycle path is blocked by cars, etc., they have to pull out, and other vehicles going along the road, near misses so often along there, so it's long overdue.
We have also drafted up, so obviously this is an ongoing scheme, so we intend to bid for funding to make improvements to the entire corridor, and there is then another stage which would create more room, but obviously we're very constrained by what room we have. So we've done some preliminary designs which we need to sit down and show Councillor Stagg, and if we were going to take that forward, it would involve changes to the footway and realignment and things like that, and we would then obviously bid for funding for that. So this is not a standalone. We intend to carry this on in order to make sure that there is a viable active travel corridor running along the east to the west of the city.
One thing I just want to ask, and that is, you know, where you're taking out that horrible tarmac bit between the two exits for Francis Avenue, are you going to put some greenery in there? Because it would make it look nicer, but also from an air quality point of view, it could take some of the air pollution out.
We'll certainly look at that. So the primary aim obviously will be to get the scheme complete, but if we can get it done under budget, then we will definitely look at green infrastructure.
Will it be better than a statue of Ollie?
I'll have to find somewhere else to put that then, won't I?
You will indeed. Right. Well, I support this entirely, and I think it's brilliant. But obviously, you're going to be working with the Cycle Forum so that the designs you come up with are the experts who are the regular cyclists.
We'll work with all key stakeholders,
fine.
Portsmouth Cycle Forum,
Brilliant.
Friends of the Earth. So all the normal key stakeholders that we work with will obviously play a part in what happens. So, I mean, obviously designs will still be compliant with design manual of roads and bridges, etc. But stakeholders will have an input into the scheme.
Lovely, thank you very much. I think that is the end. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, people. If you'd like to talk to Michelle now, I don't know your name. I think you mentioned it before, but I've forgotten it. If you want to say whatever you want to say to Michelle, thank you.